Hi, that was my version of the classic Robert Johnson song Stop Breakin Down Blues. Now, the few recordings that Johnson did, this song is probably one of his most famous. The reasons for this is because it's actually a really catchy 12-bar blues song which is typical of Johnson's style. And also because subsequently it's been covered by so many famous artists such as the Rolling Stones, Eric Clapton and the White Stripes, to name but a few. So I've just played through my version of it, which is very close to Johnson's original. And now what I want to do in the video is have a look at the structure of the song, then I want to give you some playing tips before finally playing through it again a bit slower and putting the tab on screen. Okay, so now I want to have a look at the structure of the song. Now, Stop Breakin Down Blues is very typical of Johnson's playing style. So at its core, what you have is a 12-bar blues, and he just puts some slight adaptations and variations on this. Like I said, that's very typical of a lot of his music. Now, like most 12-bar blues, the majority of the song's in 4/4 time. There is a 5/4 bar added near the end for the outro section, but essentially the music is in 4/4 time. Now, it's played on a guitar in open G tuning, and because of that, it's in the key of G. And the three main chords that are used through it are G, C, and D, and also their seventh equivalents. So it basically is a 12-bar blues at its core, and it actually follows the standard 12-bar blues pattern quite closely. So what you get, as you would expect in a 12-bar blues in G, is you get 4 bars of G, 2 bars of C, then 2 bars of G again, then D, then a C, and then finishing up on 2 bars of G. So that's really the core of the song, and this just repeats throughout. The actual guitar part doesn't vary a huge amount, although when Johnson played through it on his original, he does put some minor variations in it, which is common in his music. But ultimately, the guitar part stays quite similar throughout. And it just keeps repeating this 12-bar structure. And the variation in the music really comes from his singing part. So what I've done in my version is basically just done 2 playthroughs of this 12-bar section. Now, these are mostly just the same, but there are a few minor variations in them, which is similar to how Johnson played his. So I've got these 2 playthroughs of the 12-bar section. In addition to that, I've got the 2-bar intro at the start. I've also got the 2-bar outro section at the end, and also there's a couple of additional bars he throws in before one of the repeats of the 12-bar, and I've added them in as well, and that's between the 2 12-bar sections I've played. So I think from what I've given you, you can pretty much play the whole song. Yes, in his recorded version, there are a few other minor variations within it, but I think you've got to understand that probably when this was recorded and played, you know, the variations varied when he played through. A lot of it was played ad hoc, I would imagine. So anyway, in the structure I've given you the 12-bar section played twice, the intro, the outro, and the short bridge section. So that should be enough if you want to just keep repeating it and play the whole song from that. Okay, so now I want to give you some tips on playing this song. And it's really very characteristic of Johnson's style and the Delta style of blues, where you've got the thumb picking out the bass notes on the lower strings and the other fingers playing the melody notes or intermittent notes on the higher strings. So the first thing I want to have a look at is the use of palm muting when playing the bass strings. Now, Johnson's original recording is quite rough. You know that the quality of the recording isn't that good, but you can clearly hear that when he's playing the intro section and then going into the verse section, you can hear him bringing in the use of palm muting on the bass strings. And I've done this in certain sections of my version, but not all of it. So when the bass notes are getting played in the open position on the 5th string, like this, I'm employing palm muting, so you're getting a sound like this. So it does sound like Johnson's original. But when he changes to the other chords, the C and D chords, what he's doing is he's playing the bass notes on the third and fourth strings like this. And what I find when I'm playing, it could just be this guitar or the way the microphone's picking it up, is that I'm finding that when that's palm muted, I'm hardly getting any sound. So when, you know, decent palm muting on it like this, you know, I feel I'm hardly getting any sound out of it. So what I've done is I've basically just taken the palm muting off when I'm playing at those other chords across the higher strings like that. Listening through Johnson's version, I don't think he does this, but it is hard to say because the quality isn't that good. But I'm finding when I'm playing it through that it works for me better, and I think it sounds better if I drop the palm muting when playing these other sections. So it's really up to you where you want to employ this palm muting. Perhaps if you're singing over it, you might want to keep all the bass strings subdued by palm muting them. Maybe if you're playing it as a solo piece without singing, you might not want to employ any palm muting at all. Like I said, I believe in Johnson's original from listening through it. He kept the palm muting on all the bass notes. I just found it didn't work for me when playing through this. So you find what works best for you when playing through it. Another thing I want to talk about with the bass notes is the use of double strings, or playing double strings when hitting the bass notes. Now again, listening through Johnson's original recording, it seems that he does play double bass notes quite a bit. So instead of, say, if you were playing the G chord bass notes like this, he plays through two strings like this. When you're playing it open like that, it maybe doesn't sound that good. It's maybe just too dominant within the music, but if you mute it, it sounds okay. Now again, what I've done is I felt when I was writing my version, when playing across the G chord, that's when the bass notes are on the lower string, like the fifth string like this. I found that just playing the single string was fine. But again, when you're moving up the neck and playing the bass notes on these higher strings, the third and fourth strings, I found that it was just a bit lacking. Like that. So I was playing the double strings there. Like that. And I think that just gave it a slightly fuller sound. Again, this is entirely up to you how you play it. Because the original recording, again, is, you know, I'm saying this, it's quite rough. It is hard to tell what he's doing, and I doubt that every pick with a thumb on the bass notes, he's hitting the same strings perfectly. You know, it sounds like sometimes he's hitting a single string, sometimes he's getting two, like this. So what I'm saying is, I've written out in the tab in a structured way, but you certainly don't have to play it in that structured way. You know, if you only hit one bass string, that's fine. If you drive through two bass strings, that's fine too. You know, you work it out, but don't feel that you have to rigidly hold yourself to playing these single string or double strings when playing the bass notes. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is using a slide when playing it. Now, I don't use a slide when playing it because I don't really see any need to use it, and adding a slide in just makes it slightly more cumbersome and trickier to play. Now, did Johnson use a slide in his original recording? The answer to that is I don't know. The last two notes within it that go like this, it actually sounds like a slide's getting used, but it is hard to tell. But most of the music, there's absolutely no need to have a slide, and when you listen through his original, it doesn't really sound like he's using a slide very much. So all the notes within this piece can be played using a slide. There are some that might be a bit of stretch, so when you move up the neck like this, you know, you're having to stretch over here, like. But that's certainly not impossible with a slide if you've got it on your pinky. So the whole song can be played with a slide. So if you're competent with a slide, why not give it a go? It might give you an enhanced sound to the music that you may like. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is the tempo of the music, which is actually deceptively fast. When you listen through it, it doesn't sound too fast, but when you start playing, you realise it is going at quite a fast tempo. Now, although this shouldn't be a problem for most of the music, within the melody section there are some eighth note triplets in there, and they do have to be played with quite nimble fingers at speed. If you're struggling with the tempo, by all means just slow the music down. I think it sounds just as good played a bit slower. If you want to play original tempo and you're having trouble with these triplets, just leave one of the notes of the triplet out. And just play it, instead of playing it as an eighth note triplet, just play it as eighth notes. And that'll give you a bit more time to pick these notes, and it should still sound fine. And I think this is applicable to the entire song, insofar as you do not have to stick rigidly to the music. The best way to view the music is basically a roadmap for what to play. So as long as you're getting the chord changes in the right place and the melody notes, the intermittent notes you're playing are in the right key, it's going to sound fine. So if you don't play some of the notes the same as how it's written, it doesn't matter. As long as it's in tune, it's going to sound fine. So like all blues pieces like this, it has a lot of scope for variation and to add your own individual touch to it. And I think that's definitely something you should do with this piece and with most blues pieces as well. So that's a bit about the structure and some help on playing it. Now what I want to do is just play through the music and put the tab on screen so you can see the fingerings and see how it's played on the guitar.